For the past decade, I have lived in a complicated and often frustrating dynamic with my wife, Lisa. I am 47 years old, and she is 42. We have been married for 17 years, but we truly lived together as a couple for only the first 7. Our relationship took a dramatic turn when, 10 years ago, I discovered that Lisa was cheating on me. When confronted, she admitted to falling out of love and proposed an open marriage instead of a divorce. At the time, our 2 children were incredibly young. Our eldest was a toddler, and our youngest was just an infant. The situation devastated me. Lisa claimed that the back-to-back pregnancies had drained her physically and emotionally, leaving her needing an escape. Unfortunately, her way of coping involved multiple affairs. Divorce seemed nearly impossible back then, given our financial situation and the well-being of our children. With no real options, I reluctantly agreed to her terms and moved upstairs in our duplex home while she continued her life the way she wanted. Our split wasn't amicable initially. There was bitterness, anger, and many heated arguments, mostly from my side since she was the one who had cheated. Over time, however, life carried on, and I buried my resentment, focusing instead on work and our children. Lisa and I settled into a co-parenting arrangement, though we never truly reconciled as a couple. She freely dated and brought different men home, and I chose to stay out of her personal affairs. Recently, my life took an unexpected turn when I met Kathy, a 35-year-old colleague. She is my junior at work, and from the very beginning, we connected effortlessly. Our bond started as a natural, easy friendship with no romantic undertones. We enjoyed each other's company and spent time together beyond work. Then, about a month ago, things changed. We shared a kiss, and suddenly I realized how deeply I felt for her. Since then, she has been spending a lot of time at my place, and for the first time in years, I felt a genuine emotional connection with someone. That was when Lisa's behavior began to shift drastically. Technically, we are still legally married, but she has never shown any concern about my personal life. Until now. Lately, she has been intruding on my time with Kathy in strange and passive-aggressive ways, acting as if she still has authority over me. One evening, Kathy and I were having dinner in my kitchen when Lisa suddenly appeared and casually asked, "Can I join you guys?" The situation immediately became awkward. Kathy and I exchanged looks of disbelief, but before we could respond, Lisa simply sat down with her plate as if it were the most natural thing in the world. What was supposed to be a quiet, intimate dinner turned into an uncomfortable experience, with Lisa forcing herself into conversation with irrelevant small talk. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just trying to be friendly, though it felt unnatural. But then, her behavior escalated. Another evening, Kathy and I were upstairs watching a movie when Lisa barged in without knocking. She demanded that I come downstairs immediately because our younger child needed help with a science project. This was surprising because Lisa and I had a clear arrangement. I assisted our eldest with schoolwork while she took care of our younger child's academic needs. I reminded her of this, but she snapped, "Is he not your child too?" Instead of helping him, "You're up here fooling around like an idiot." The argument that followed was explosive. Kathy, feeling incredibly uncomfortable, left soon after. The next day, she told me she would rather not visit my place anymore. While we still meet at her home, I can't help but feel frustrated. Why should I have to adjust my life when Lisa has never had to? For 10 years, I have turned a blind eye to her actions, allowing her to live however she pleased. She brought different men home without any concern for how it affected me, and I chose not to interfere. Now that I have found someone meaningful, Lisa is subtly acting possessive and deliberately trying to sabotage my relationship. When I confronted her about it, she denied everything, acting as if she had no issue with me seeing Kathy. But her actions speak louder than words. It feels like she doesn't want to move on, even though she's been doing exactly that for the past decade. For the past decade, I have lived in an unusual arrangement with my wife, Lisa, and our relationship has become increasingly unbearable. Despite being technically married, we have been separated for 10 years, living as housemates and co-parenting our 2 children. The situation arose after Lisa's infidelity and her insistence on an open marriage. a decision I reluctantly accepted due to financial and legal constraints. Recently, Lisa has started interfering in my personal life, particularly my relationship with Kathy, my coworker and now girlfriend. When I confronted Lisa about her behavior, she dismissed it, saying I was overthinking. I told her that if she continued to intrude into my space, I would have to seriously consider getting a divorce. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes, and she claimed she never meant to disturb us. She justified her actions by saying she was simply anxious about our son's unfinished project and had been overwhelmed with work, which is why she asked for my help. I wasn't convinced. I told her that what she did wasn't a simple request for assistance. It was a form of manipulation. She knew our arrangement for splitting responsibilities, yet she deliberately disrupted my time with Kathy to assert control. I called her out on her gaslighting tactics. Perhaps realizing that her interference had pushed too far, Lisa took an unexpected step. She called Kathy and apologized, even inviting her over to smooth things over. Kathy, being the mature person she is, accepted the apology, but she set clear boundaries. She made it clear that she would prefer meeting me at her place rather than dealing with Lisa's presence at mine. While this resolved the immediate tension, it left me in a difficult position. I now find myself at a crossroads, unsure of how to proceed. For years, I tolerated Lisa's choices, prioritizing my children over my own happiness. But now, with Kathy in my life, I no longer want to live under Lisa's shadow. The idea of divorce is becoming more appealing. Back then, I stayed married because I didn't want to force my children to choose between their parents. But now, I wonder if I should finally put myself first, even if it means making a difficult decision that could impact my children. At the same time, I fear what Lisa might do if I take this step. I worry she will try to sabotage my relationship with Kathy, just as she has been doing already. And then there's a question of time. Should I wait until my children are older before making a move? Would Kathy wait that long for me? Even now, I remain bitter about how this all started. Lisa's decision to open our marriage shattered everything, and I regret not standing my ground and pushing back. But more than my anger at her, I am angry at myself for accepting this arrangement, for letting it go on for so long, and for sacrificing my own happiness just to avoid conflict. To give more context to those wondering about the full story, this all began 10 years ago. After the birth of our second child, Lisa changed. She withdrew emotionally and physically, avoiding intimacy and refusing to let me get close to her. She claimed it was due to the physical and mental toll of pregnancy and breastfeeding, and I respected that. But as time passed, I noticed she wasn't just avoiding sex. She was distancing herself from me entirely. I suggested couples therapy, but she dismissed it, insisting it was just a postpartum phase that she would eventually recover from. However, a year passed and nothing changed. I had been patient, but I finally confronted her, demanding that we address the growing distance between us. I told her she either needed to be honest with me or agree to work on our relationship through therapy. At first, she deflected, tried to make me feel guilty for even bringing it up. She accused me of being insensitive, of not understanding what she was going through. But I refused to let the issue slide this time. I started digging for the truth. I checked her phone but found little evidence. She had erased most of her messages and emails. Still, something felt off. One day, she told me she was going shopping with her friends. I had a gut feeling that she was lying, so I decided to follow her. What I discovered shattered my world. She wasn't with friends. She was at a young college student's house. I knocked on the door, and a shirtless man answered. Behind him, on the couch, was Lisa, barely dressed, scrambling to cover herself. I lost control. I grabbed the guy by his neck, ready to hit him, but Lisa jumped in between us, pleading with me to stop. What she said next stung me even more. She admitted that he wasn't the only one. She had been seeing multiple men. The young man standing before me looked just as shocked as I was. He had no idea Lisa was married with kids. When we returned home, I did everything a betrayed husband would do, except resorting to violence, because that's not who I am. Instead, I exposed Lisa's infidelity to her family. I called her parents and told them everything. I was furious and determined to get a divorce. I even went so far as to hire a lawyer and discuss the case. But as the legal process unfolded, reality hit me. Divorce wasn't as simple as I had hoped. Given that our children were still very young, the court would likely favor Lisa as their primary guardian. The best I could hope for was joint custody, but even then, I would be at Lisa's mercy when it came to spending time with my children. Yes, I could go to court to enforce my rights, but realistically, how many times could I afford to fight these legal battles? Adding to the frustration, we lived in a no-fault state, meaning Lisa's infidelity had no bearing on the divorce settlement. I would still have to pay alimony, and child support was inevitable. Lisa, for her part, was also against a divorce. Instead, she proposed an open marriage, suggesting that we could live separate lives but still remain legally married. She framed it as a practical solution that would allow us both freedom while keeping our family intact. I had no interest in reconciling, but divorce felt like an uphill battle I wasn't equipped to fight. So, reluctantly, I agreed. We separated within our own home, with me moving upstairs while she continued her affairs freely. Lisa called it an open marriage, but to me, it was the end of our relationship. Over the past decade, Lisa has had numerous partners, though she insists none of them were serious. I highly doubt that. There were at least 3 men who were clearly more than casual flings. She went on vacations with them, brought them home, and openly displayed affection in ways that went beyond mere hookups. Watching all of this unfold was never easy, but I forced myself to tolerate it. Now, things are different. I have finally found someone who makes me happy. Yet Lisa is suddenly trying to disrupt my life. Looking back, I feel like I sacrificed my own happiness for years. And for what? To avoid conflict? To keep my family intact? Maybe it's time I stopped letting Lisa control my life. Maybe it's time I finally put myself first. But the question remains, should I wait until my children are older, or should I take the leap now? And if I wait, will Kathy still be there? For the first time in years, I have something to lose, and I don't want Lisa to take it away from me. It's been a long and painful journey, but I have finally taken steps toward reclaiming my life. For the past 10 years, I have lived under the same roof as my wife, Lisa, though we have been nothing more than housemates. We live in a duplex house, which we bought from an Asian couple who originally built it with the intention of having their son live upstairs while maintaining his privacy. However, their son moved out, and they found the house too large for just the 2 of them, so they sold it to us. The layout of the house became both a curse and a small blessing for me. The main entrance leads into a spacious living room, a large closed kitchen with a dining area, and a master bedroom that Lisa occupies. There's also a small storeroom that we converted into our children's bedroom. Upstairs, there is a guest room the same size as the master bedroom, which became my space. The rest of the upper floor consists of a large library-like area for reading and hosting guests, with access to a small terrace. The back door of the house leads to a passage that connects directly to the stairs, allowing me to go in and out without passing through the main living space. While this setup gave me some privacy, it also meant that I could see almost everything happening downstairs. And what I saw over the years often made me wish I could unsee it. Lisa never stopped bringing men into our home, into our bedroom, our former bedroom. I had to witness multiple partners coming and going, right under the same roof where our children lived. It was a nightmare I endured for the sake of my kids, forcing myself to remain vigilant even when all I wanted was to shut my eyes to the reality of my so-called marriage. At the beginning, I tried distracting myself. I, too, attempted to embrace the single life, going on casual dates and exploring new relationships. But after a few months, I realized it was empty and meaningless. There was no real connection, just a hollow attempt at filling the void. So I stopped and shifted my focus elsewhere. I joined a badminton club and worked on my athleticism, reigniting my passion for sports from my college days. On weekends, I joined a hiking club that organized solo hikes every 2 months. No friends, no familiar faces, just a group of strangers on a shared adventure. It was exhilarating, a much-needed escape from my home life. For 2 years, I went on these hikes religiously, though now I only participate twice a year. Over the past decade, I have had occasional flings, but nothing serious, no emotional connections, no long-term relationships. I was incapable of forming one. That changed when I met Kathy. She was different. With her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: happiness, excitement, the possibility of love. But just as I started believing I could finally move on, the devil of my past, Lisa, found a way to interfere yet again. Kathy refuses to come to my house, and I understand why. She doesn't want to be around Lisa, even though she is fine with my children. This has left me in an impossible position. It feels as though I am being forced to choose between Kathy and my children, a decision that is tearing me apart. After much contemplation, I finally sought therapy. It was one of the best decisions I have ever made. Therapy helped me identify my focal point, what I truly wanted at this stage in my life. My children are growing up, entering their teenage years, and in a few years, they will be off living their own lives. It made no sense to put my happiness on hold indefinitely. With this newfound clarity, I had an open and honest conversation with Kathy. I told her exactly how I felt. I wanted to be with her. If she felt the same way, I was willing to make the necessary changes in my life. Kathy admitted she felt the same way but was hesitant because of my complicated family dynamics. She didn't want to be entangled in the mess that was my legal marriage. She was fine with my children, but Lisa was a deal breaker. I assured her that I would work it out. I decided it was time to move out. My children were old enough to decide for themselves where they wanted to live, whether they wanted to stay with their mother, move in with me, or split their time between us. Kathy agreed with this approach. My therapist also suggested that the children should receive counseling to help them understand our marital situation in an age-appropriate manner. When I informed Lisa about this, she exploded. She accused me of being selfish, of dragging our children into an unnecessary mess. She claimed I was destroying their lives by getting serious with Kathy, and that I should be prioritizing my family over my personal desires. That was the moment I lost it. Really, Lisa? Are you the one giving me a lecture on family morals? Where were these ethics of yours when you were screwing different men while our children were still breastfeeding? I was done with her hypocrisy. I ignored her outburst and took the kids to the counselor. It turned out to be a good decision. The children handled the news surprisingly well. They appreciated that we had stayed together for their sake for so long, but they also acknowledged that I had the right to be happy. With my children's understanding and support, I informed Lisa that I was officially filing for divorce. She acted shocked, as if this was an unforeseen betrayal. She sobbed, claiming, "I thought we agreed never get divorced. We were supposed to be with each other forever. Now that you found this woman, you're abandoning your family for her." She then had the audacity to say, "I've met so many men who wanted to marry me, but I never left my marriage with them." I was beyond done. Stop trying to guilt-trip me, Lisa. It's not going to work. Just cut the crap and sign the papers. I laid out the terms. I would continue paying for the children's education through college. She could keep the house and the car as part of the alimony, and I would move out. I was choosing my happiness over money, something I couldn't afford to do back then, but can now. She cried. She pleaded. She tried every trick in the book to convince me to stay married. She even suggested that I could move in with Kathy, but remain legally married to her. But I knew better. If I did that, Lisa would never let Kathy live in peace. She would find ways to humiliate her, to undermine our relationship. I love Kathy, I told her firmly, and I don't want her to be called my mistress. Even if the world doesn't see her that way, I know you will, and I won't let you do that to her. The divorce papers should arrive any day now. I plan to move in with Kathy next month, after my children's annual exams are over. Once that is done, I will take them on a trip before officially starting my new life. I am counting down the days until I am finally free. And yet, Lisa continues to be a nightmare. She isn't done making my life difficult. As I said in my last update, during my vacation with the kids, Lisa took advantage of my absence to execute her latest scheme. With me out of reach, she approached Kathy, sobbing and pleading with her to back off, insisting that she was tearing apart our family. She played the victim, claiming that our children would suffer because of her, attempting to guilt-trip Kathy into walking away. But when Kathy stood her ground and refused to be manipulated, Lisa changed tactics. She coldly declared that I wasn't serious about Kathy, dismissing her as nothing more than a passing fling. Lisa is a shrewd and calculating woman. She knows exactly how to play her cards and manipulate situations to her advantage. She deliberately chose a time when I had limited access to communication, ensuring that Kathy wouldn't be able to reach me easily. Had Kathy been insecure, Lisa's words would have been enough to plant doubt and incite turmoil. But that's one of the things I love most about Kathy. She is secure, calm, and composed, even in the face of manipulation. She didn't overreact or panic. Instead, she waited patiently for my return. She had the contact information for the hotel where I was staying, yet she chose not to disturb me. That simple act of trust and restraint reaffirmed my love for her. When I got home and learned about Lisa's latest attempt at sabotage, I was livid. I stormed over to her place and unleashed years of pent-up frustration. She had crossed every limit, and it was time she understood that her reign of manipulation was over. I should have confronted her like this long ago, should have made it clear that she had no right to interfere in my life anymore. Her entitled behavior had spiraled out of control, and I refused to let her dictate my happiness any longer. After that confrontation, I officially moved out. My children chose to stay with me, but we didn't have a spare room for them in my new place. So for the time being, they remained with their mother while I searched for a larger home. As expected, Lisa did not take my departure gracefully. She threw tantrums, tried every tactic imaginable, from guilt-tripping to screaming, from gaslighting to breaking down in tears and pleading for another chance. But I was unmoved. I made it clear to her that our relationship had ended a decade ago. We had been nothing more than housemates and co-parents, and any illusion she had of reconciliation was just that, an illusion. The truth was simple. I had moved on. I loved Kathy and wanted to build my future with her. When the divorce papers arrived, Lisa reacted with predictable theatrics. She tore them to shreds in a childish display of defiance. It took my lawyer sending her a formal notice threatening legal consequences before she finally relented and agreed to sign. The divorce proceedings began, and from that point on, I distanced myself from her entirely. I only went back twice to pick up the kids, never stepping foot inside the house. For those wondering, my children are now 11 and 13, old enough to understand what's happening and mature enough to handle the separation. And now, for the best update yet, I am officially divorced. Lisa is now my ex-wife. The legal battle is over, and my children have moved in with me. However, they will still visit their mother every 2 weeks, or whenever they feel like it. The past month has been exhausting. Finding a new house, renting it, and moving in was a logistical nightmare. We deliberately avoided telling Lisa about the children moving in with me until everything was settled. We all knew her reaction would be explosive, so we postponed inevitable confrontation for as long as possible. The kids even suggested keeping their bags packed and sneaking out when Lisa wasn't home, but I refused. I wanted everything done legally and properly to avoid unnecessary complications. As per our divorce agreement, we are required to give each other a 3-day notice if we plan to take the children for more than 2 days. So, I informed Lisa that the kids had decided to live with me permanently and that I would be picking them up in 3 days. As expected, she freaked out. Surprisingly, she did not resort to her usual tantrums of breaking things or screaming. Instead, she went the emotional route. She hugged our children, sobbed, and begged them not to abandon her. She apologized profusely, vowing that she had changed and asking for another chance. Her desperation was enough to sway our younger son. He decided that he wanted to stay with his mother. Kathy had warned me that this might happen and advised me to be prepared. When my son called to tell me his decision, I remained calm. I told him, "That's okay. Dad loves you no matter what." My elder son, however, was unwavering in his decision to move out. I respected their choices and prepared to pick up my eldest. But when I arrived at the house, I was surprised to find both of my sons packed and ready to leave. Something had changed in those 3 days, but I didn't ask questions. They had already endured enough emotional turmoil, and I didn't want to add to it. I hugged them both and brought them home. Kathy and I have been working to make the transition as smooth as possible for them. We've involved them in setting up their new room, allowing them to choose everything to their liking so they feel at home. When the children were leaving Lisa's house, I expected her to make one last desperate attempt to stop them, but she had finally given up. She sat there, crying silently, hugging them tightly and telling them she loved them. She assured them that they were always welcome back, whenever they wanted. Then, unexpectedly, she turned to me and asked if I had time for a coffee. Her request was unexpected, but something in her voice sounded different. It wasn't manipulative or insincere, it was just raw. So I agreed. During our conversation, she admitted that she had been delusional. She had assumed I would never truly leave her. Even when Kathy came into my life, she had dismissed her as just another fleeting distraction. She admitted to taking me for granted, believing that the stability I provided would always be there, no matter how she treated me. For the first time, she acknowledged her selfishness and narcissistic behavior. And for the first time, it seemed like she truly meant it. I didn't know how to respond. I simply smiled, suppressing any emotions that threatened to surface. When I stood up to leave, she stepped forward and hugged me. That was the first time in 10 years that we had shared any form of physical contact. I can't quite describe how I felt at that moment. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad either. I was just numb. The last 6 to 7 months have been life-changing. I know it will take time to fully process everything that has happened, but I am finally free. Thank you all for your support. You have no idea how much it has meant to me. I might update this thread if anything else happens, but for now, this is where my story stands. The next story is one that is deeply personal and painful. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, a lesson in self-respect and resilience. My wife, the woman I had loved since childhood, cheated on me with her own cousin. When I discovered the affair, I exposed him to the entire family and ultimately divorced her. My wife and I had known each other our entire lives. Our story was one that many would call a fairy tale. Childhood friends who grew up together, fell in love, and eventually got married. We shared our first kiss with each other, and I had always believed that I was the only man she had ever been with, just as she was the only woman for me. Our families were close-knit, and as children, we spent countless hours playing together. Our parents would often joke that we were destined to be together, and as time went on, that sentiment seemed to become a reality. After graduating from college, we took the next big step and got married. It felt like everything was falling into place. We bought a home in our hometown, a house that had once belonged to my uncle, ensuring we remained close to our families. It was the perfect start to what I believed would be a lifelong journey of happiness. As the years went by, we decided to expand our family, and soon we were blessed with twins. Life was beautiful, and I was convinced I had everything I had ever wanted. Then one evening, out of the blue, my wife brought up an unexpected topic while we were watching a TV show. She asked me if I ever regretted never being with another woman. I was taken aback by the question, but answered truthfully, I didn't. Yes, I had found other women attractive at times, but the thought of being with someone else had never crossed my mind. I was content with the love we shared. When I asked her why she was bringing it up, she brushed it off, saying she had just been thinking about it and was worried that I might grow bored with her. The conversation ended there, but in hindsight, I should have paid closer attention to the warning signs. Years before, when my wife was still a teenager, her aunt had gone through a difficult and bitter divorce. During that time, her aunt had stayed with my wife's family for a while before eventually remarrying. Her new husband had 2 sons around our age, and with their arrival, it was as though we had 2 new friends in the neighborhood. Both boys were energetic and rowdy, but one in particular, Paul, had a reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker. Paul was the kind of person who was always at the center of wild parties. He had a tendency to get into trouble and had a well-known history of sleeping around. Despite this, he was charming and charismatic, the kind of person who could lighten up any gathering. Over the years, he settled down a bit, holding a stable job and attempting to lead a more structured life. However, he still struggled with relationships. They never seemed to last long, and whenever one ended, Paul would take it hard. At one point, Paul had been dating a woman he really liked, but when she broke up with him, He was devastated. Seeking comfort, he reached out to both my wife and me, being the caring and sensitive woman she was. My wife decided to visit him, cook him dinner, and lend a sympathetic ear. I opted not to go, thinking he might feel more comfortable confiding in her alone. I trusted my wife completely and never suspected that anything inappropriate would happen between them. That night, when she returned home, something felt off. When I asked her about their conversation, she was unusually evasive. She provided vague answers, avoiding any specifics about what they had talked about. At the time, I thought her behavior was odd, but I didn't dwell on it. Looking back, it was a glaring red flag. In the following days, my wife's behavior changed noticeably. She became overly affectionate, more so than usual. She showered me with compliments, cooked my favorite meals, and even surprised me with small gifts. While she had always been a loving partner, the sudden shift felt excessive, almost forced. It reminded me of how a guilty child tries to overcompensate after breaking something. A week after her initial visit, she told me she was going back to see Paul, this time to bring him more food. I offered to accompany her, but she insisted it was best if she went alone. She reasoned that he was still emotionally fragile and might not feel comfortable discussing things in front of me. Again, I saw no reason to doubt her, so I stayed home and put the kids to bed. As the weeks went by, she started visiting Paul more frequently. At first, I convinced myself that she was just being a supportive cousin, but the frequency of her visits and the secrecy surrounding them started to unsettle me. Paul had been through multiple breakups before, yet I had never seen him this distraught over a relationship. Something wasn't adding up. One evening, I confronted my wife, asking her what was really going on. I didn't outright accuse her of cheating. I still wanted to believe she was faithful, but I knew something was amiss. She stuck to her story, insisting that Paul was simply struggling emotionally. When I suggested that I talk to him myself, she quickly dismissed the idea, saying it wouldn't be helpful. The next day, I decided to check on Paul myself. My wife wasn't working at the time, so I used my lunch break to stop by his house unannounced. What I found would change everything. She was a stay-at-home mom, and with the kids at school during the day, she had plenty of free time to herself. That afternoon, when I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed her car parked there. She hadn't mentioned any plans to visit Paul, so I was taken aback. As I approached the front door, ready to ring the bell and walk in, I heard sounds that sent a chill through my body. Just on the other side of the door, unmistakable noises echoed through the entryway. It didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. My wife was being pinned against the door, moaning in a way I had never heard before. My body froze. My mind refused to accept the reality unfolding in front of me. This was the absolute last thing I had ever expected. For a few moments, I stood there paralyzed. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone out of my pocket and, almost instinctively, dialed her number. On the other side of the door, I heard her phone vibrate, followed by a sudden pause in their movements. They both went completely still. A moment later, I heard her reject the call. Then, in hushed tones, Paul whispered something I couldn't quite make out, and she responded, telling him that my call in the middle of the day made her nervous. Paul let out a chuckle, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I have something that can take your mind off that," he teased. A second later, I heard the familiar sound of them kissing again, their footsteps retreating deeper into the house. I stood outside, staring at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Shock, pain, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of finality. The reality hit me like a freight train. My marriage was over. All those years, all those memories, all the trust, we had built a life together, and she had just shattered in the span of an afternoon. There was no coming back from this. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed proof, and I knew exactly how to get it. I had been to Paul's house many times before and remembered that he always kept a spare key under a rock near his porch. With a determination I hadn't felt before, I retrieved the key and quietly let myself in. The unmistakable noises led me straight to the bedroom. The door was wide open, and I stood in the doorway, my phone in hand, recording the undeniable evidence of their betrayal. After about 30 seconds, I knocked loudly on the doorframe. They both turned, eyes wide with panic, scrambling to cover themselves. My wife's face went pale as she stammered, searching for an excuse. The most ridiculous part? She actually chased after me, barely dressed, yelling some absurd justification. I was just helping him get over another woman. As if that made it okay. As if that made this any less of a complete betrayal. I walked straight past her, got into my car, and drove off. I didn't go back to work that day. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at my phone as I searched for the best divorce attorney I could find. Within an hour, I had scheduled an appointment. Then I went home, packed a bag, and headed straight to my parents' house, bringing the kids with me. My wife blew up my phone with call after call, text after text. I ignored them all. The only message I sent her was a short, simple one. I have the kids. They're safe. I need time away from you. The next time she saw me, it wasn't for reconciliation. It was when she was served with divorce papers. But even that wasn't enough for me. She had destroyed our family, and I wasn't about to let her move on as if nothing had happened. I wanted the world to know the truth. So I made a heartfelt Facebook post detailing exactly what had transpired. I didn't hold back. I explained betrayal in all its humiliating detail. Paul wasn't her blood relative, but he was still family. And people weren't going to be okay with that. The backlash was immediate. Family members flooded the comments, expressing their disgust and disappointment. Friends reached out, shocked by what she had done. The post spread quickly, and soon my wife and Paul were receiving hateful messages from all corners. Later that day, both of them called me, begging me to take the post down. People are saying horrible things to us, she cried. Please, just delete it. I refused. You made your bed, I told her. Now lie in it. From that day forward, both my wife and Paul were practically exiled from the family. They lost friends, respect, and any sense of belonging within our community. Word traveled fast in our small town, and the reputation Paul once had as a bachelor on the dating scene was now in ruins. Who would want to date a man who slept with his own cousin? In the end, the divorce settled heavily in my favor. Since I had purchased all of our assets, I was awarded the house and everything inside it. She received no spousal support. Until she managed to find a job, I had primary custody of the kids. She had made her choices, and she had to live with the consequences.